quick content warning before we begin. Some of these movies deal with heavy topics like war trauma, murder, addiction, conversion therapy. I definitely won't be going into graphic detail, so you don't have to worry about that, but still, if that's not your thing, then I'll see you in a... Oh my gosh, that was so funny. I'll see you in another video. Yeah. Hello, today we're going to be talking about all the movies that I watched in Q1, so January, February, and March. So this month was kind of a mixed bag. We have some incredibly heavy dramas, some twisty thrillers, a couple of horror movies, a rom-com, and of course some book-to-movie adaptations. Come on. So the first movie we have for January is Incendies.
Incendies.
And I do apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong. This is a French film. And this movie follows twins whose late mother leaves behind a final request in her will. And in her will, she wants them to deliver 2 letters. And one of the letters is to a father who they believed was dead. And then the other letter that she wants them to deliver is to a brother that they didn't even know existed. And so what starts as this search for answers about their family turns into a haunting journey through war, trauma, silence, and some really messed up secrets. And one thing that I really liked about this movie is how we moved through 2 timelines. So in the present, of course, you're following the twins as they're trying to piece everything together. And in the past, you're following what their mother went through. So yeah, I really like that structure because it kind of feels like we're unsolving everything that happened with them. And I watched this movie because I saw it recommended a lot as a movie that has a really good plot twist, but watching this movie, it is so much more than its twist. The performances are very subtle and realistic, and if you've watched the movie, you know. There's just this one scene that's very impactful. So yes, I would recommend this movie, but not casually. This is not an easy watch. It is the kind of movie that stays with you long after it ends. So the next movie I watched in January was Memories of Murder by joon-ho. So you might know him for Parasite or Okja or Snowpiercer, which I haven't watched any of those. I'm so sorry. I really want to watch Parasite. If there's any other movies by him that you think I need to watch ASAP, let me know. Hey guys, quick note. This is the only movie I spoil in this video. If you want to avoid spoilers, I'll put the spoiler section timestamp on screen. Anyways, Memories of Murder is a 2003 crime thriller, and it is loosely based on a real series of murders that shook South Korea. And it follows these detectives in a rural town trying to solve these serial killings, and they're very unequipped for the scale of it. And they're just basically very inexperienced overall. Like, instead of relying on careful procedure and solid evidence, they rely on intimidation and gut instinct. So, what seems kind of like a straightforward story about a murder mystery, it kind of becomes more of a story about a broken system and the desperation that these 2 detectives feel and how they're trying to chase someone who kind of always is one step ahead of the police. And I was originally inspired to watch this because I stumbled upon this YouTuber, and I really like movie essays, so there's this YouTuber called Speakima Movies, and he has this video called Memories of Murder Hidden in Plain Sight. I stopped watching the video and I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch this and then I'm gonna come back. And then watching this movie made me look into the real life case that it's about, and it's about the Hwasong murders. And that case is incredibly dark and disturbing. It remained unsolved for decades, and the wrong man was convicted originally. Yoon Sung-yo spent around 20 years in prison before being cleared after the real killer, Lee Chun-jae, confessed years later. Another haunting detail is that by the time Lee Chun-jae was identified through DNA evidence and confessed, the statute of limitations had already expired for the Hwasong murders. Also, apparently the murderer watched the movie while in prison, and he reportedly said, and I quote, "I felt nothing while watching it." He also said that the killings were rarely on his mind and that he seldom connected himself to them. And if you've seen the movie's final shot, it's so haunting after knowing this background information, because it almost feels like the movie's staring back at the real killer. Someone who was hidden in plain sight for decades. Yeah, that movie definitely captures the same sense of desperation and lack of closure. All in all, it's really sad. So would I recommend it? Highly, but it's bleak and it's unsettling. But it's well made, just know that going into it. Wow, what a change up. Next, we're going to be talking about People We Meet on Vacation. And this is adapted from Emily Henry's book by the same name. It follows Poppy and Alex, who are polar opposites. Poppy is bold and spontaneous and always chasing something new, and Alex, like me, is quiet. He dislikes familiarity, so. And basically their friendship is built around this annual tradition where no matter what, no matter what's going on in their life, they reunite every summer for a trip. But then after one of their vacations goes wrong, a rift happens that causes them to stop talking for 2 years. And Poppy is desperate to try to reconciliate in this trip to Barcelona that they go on. And honestly, rom-coms are back. I am so ready for actually good rom-coms to make a comeback. I hope this year. Emily Bader and Tom Blythe have such good chemistry, and they really sell the friends to lovers dynamic. And I loved seeing their friendship build over the years, you know, slow and steady, because we're only seeing them at one point in their time, you know, once a year, and we get to see them gradually become friends. And the book holds a special place in my heart because it was one of the first books that I read as I got back into reading late 2021, early 2022. It's not my favorite Emily Henry book. That place belongs to Funny Story, but it's still meaningful to me. This movie was cute and fun and full of a bunch of silly little scenes, and I fear my Tom Blythe crush has gotten even worse after watching this movie. I will say, seeing the reaction to the upcoming Beach Read movie has me a little bit nervous. And Beach Read is another book by Emily Henry that's getting adapted into a movie. And there's been a lot of mixed reactions because the main guy, Gus, is going to be played by Patrick Schwarzenegger, and I understand why. I'm very protective of Gus and that character and that story and how I pictured him specifically. But the director did say that his chemistry with the actress who's playing January is one of the reasons why she casted him. So I'm trying to stay open-minded. Regardless, as for this movie, would I recommend it? Yes. Especially if you already like Emily Henry and you like friends to lovers and you like funny, cute stories with a little bit of emotional depth. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. It's not gonna like make you sob. Okay, so moving on to the last movie I watched in January, we have Eden Lake, which is a British horror thriller. And this follows Ginny and Steve, a couple that goes to a remote lake for a getaway, and then it turns into an absolute nightmare. And I'm talking like absolute nightmare. Basically, they encounter this group of hostile teens, and those teens are basically what makes the movie so scary. There's nothing supernatural about it. The horror just comes from something so ordinary. What starts as this petty harassment turns into extreme violence, and that realism just really makes it terrifying. And the mob mentality of the teenagers especially is disturbing. Brett is clearly the leader among the group, and then the other teens just kind of follow him because of, you know, fear of what he'll do to them or pressure or just trying to fit in. And then there's the fact that there is no safe, at least in this world, there is no safe adult to turn to. The cruelty of these kids doesn't come from nowhere. You know, it reflects the adults and the environment around them, and it makes the ending even more hopeless. Also, while doing some background research on this movie, I realized that Brett is played by Jack O'Connell, who is also in Sinners, which I talk about later in this video. He is such a phenomenal actor, even at such a young age he was. Would I recommend it? This is not a fun movie, but if you like realistic survival thrillers, then I think you'll like it. Now, before getting into February, I do want to briefly touch on the fact that I did technically watch the Darjeeling Limited this month, but I watched it while I was hanging out with some friends, so I wasn't really giving it the full attention it deserved. From what I did catch, it was not what I expected. I was kind of going into it expecting like a light comedy, and it was much more about grief and brotherhood. With that being said, there's probably a lot that I missed just because I was talking, so I'm not going to talk about it for this month. The first movie that I watched in February was The Game, and this is a 1997 psychological thriller. And in this movie, we follow a guy named Nicholas Van Orton, and he's this rich asshole businessman, and everything about his life is very controlled, very predictable. And on his birthday, his brother gives him this invitation to this immersive experience slash game. At first, when he enters this game, it seems strange but harmless. But of course, course, the more as he gets into it, weird things start happening and things start to unravel. So he can't really tell what is real and what's part of the game. And then this is another movie that I watched because it got recommended a lot because of its plot twist. And the more confused as our main character gets, the more we're confused as the audience because we have no idea what the hell's going on. So of course we know that the thing he values the most is control, and then this game is kind of taking that away from him. He has absolutely no control in what is going on whatsoever. And without spoiling anything, obviously the ending is twisty, but it does require some suspension of disbelief. So I think your reaction to the movie would depend on how that ending works for you. I mean, for me it did. I personally loved the mind games. Overall, it's a fun, paranoid thrill ride, and it's got a little bit of a meaningful message at the end, so I would recommend. The next movie I watched was Trainspotting, which is a 1996 British drama, and it's based on the novel by Irvine Welsh, which I have not read. It follows a group of young heroin addicts, mainly our main character Mark Renton, and he is trying to leave his self-destructive life, but he keeps getting pulled back in by addiction and by his reckless friend group. And this movie has a very strong opening with like this iconic monologue, the Choose Life monologue, if you know. If you haven't seen the movie, it's definitely worth looking up. Just look up Choose Life monologue Trainspotting and you'll find it. It's very, very good. And I watched this because I was looking for something similar to Requiem for a Dream, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And if you don't know what Requiem for a Dream is it's essentially in the same vein of this movie. You know, there are a couple big differences, but they both use exaggerated visuals and surreal moments to explore addiction. This movie does not glamorize addiction. It shows how inescapable it can feel. It feels very unique. Like some of the scenes are very energetic and darkly funny compared to the subject matter that it's talking about. And again, this is another movie that I would recommend, but not lightly. If you're interested in films about addiction, then this is one that I definitely think you should watch. And then again, jumping to a completely different movie we have But I'm a Cheerleader. And this is a 1999 satirical rom-com, and it follows Megan, who is this picture-perfect cheerleader who is sent to a conversion camp after the people around her begin to question her sexuality. And at first she's confused, but she's willing to go along with the program. But as she spends more time there and gets to know the people there, she starts to actually begin to question what she's been taught. And this movie was actually a recommendation from my friend, so I watched this with them and that was really fun. I loved Natasha Lyonne as Megan. And of course, Clea Duvall as Graham, and then the RuPaul cameo. Of course, there's the bright, exaggerated visuals. The movie has that very campy, over-the-top style, and it's using that to kind of critique the ridiculousness of conversion therapy and heteronormativity and the rigid gender roles. You know, and of course, while it's stylized and funny on the outside, it really has that deeper message. Also, fun fact, when this movie was first submitted to the MPA, it got an NC-17 rating. The director, Jamie Babbit, had to cut and edit certain scenes to get it down to an R rating. And it's literally just because there was LGBTQ plus content in it. Straight movies that had the exact same content in it were given an R rating. Meanwhile, they were trying to give this an NC-17 rating. So double standard there. Don't love that. So would I recommend it? Yes. So the next movie I watched was The Village, directed by M. Night Shyamalan, which is a 2004 psychological thriller. And this is set up in this old-fashioned, secluded community. They are essentially cut off from the outside world, and then these strict rules are put in place to keep them safe from these mysterious creatures that live in the woods. And the story centers on our main character, Ivy. So a lot of fear and curiosity is spreading out through the village, and people are starting to wonder what's real and what is believed. And I really did like the isolated setting, how the village was cut off from the rest of the world. And I thought the performances were very strong, especially Bryce Dallas Howard and young Joaquin Phoenix. I love Joaquin Phoenix. The story is also a love story, you know, between those two characters, and they really bring a lot of emotional depth to it. And this movie is less about the supernatural element and more about belief, what people believe and why they choose to believe it, and how fear can be used to create and maintain systems of control, even if those systems are built on questionable or fragile truths. And like so many of Shyamalan's films, this has an ending that completely reframes what comes before it. And this is one of his more divisive films. Some people really connect with the atmosphere and the themes, and then some people kind of find it hard to buy into the twist, but I really liked it. Would recommend. So moving into March, the first movie I watched was A Perfect Getaway, which is a 2009 thriller, and it follows newlyweds Cliff and Sydney as they go on their honeymoon to Hawaii. And they're on this remote hiking trail, and as they're on this trail, they run into this other couple. But then there are these reports of a brutal double murder happening on the island that they're at. So of course, the group of travelers are freaking out. They don't trust each other. And again, I really like movies with the isolated setting, so there is nowhere to run, there's nowhere to hide, which adds a lot to the suspense. And also, one of the characters in this movie is played by Steve Zahn, and I love Steve Zahn because he is such a versatile actor. It's funny to see him in something like this and then compare him to something like one of my other favorite movies, Strange Wilderness, which if you haven't seen that movie and you like stupid, like I'm talking really dumb movies, please watch that one. It's hilarious. And again, this is one of those movies where your opinion on it will change with how you feel about the reveal. So if you want something quick to throw on and just have maybe even in the background, I would recommend this one. It's not super deep thematically, but it's fun. And next was Sinners. And this is a horror thriller that takes place in the American South. And it follows twin brothers, both played by Michael B. Jordan. And the twins return to their hometown and they're basically trying to move on from their past, and so they open this juke joint. This movie takes place in the span of one night, which I really like movies that take place in the span of a night or a day, just in a really short time period. Those are fun. But basically over the course of this night at the juke joint, there's this supernatural force, and this force is connected to the town's history, and it starts to emerge. And one thing about this movie is I have been meaning to watch this since it came out like in theaters, and I just never got to it. I am so glad I finally did. And music is central to this film. It is not just background, it is the plot. And the music, it's like supernatural. It connects people to the community, and there's a sense of identity and history behind it. And the movie especially draws inspiration from blues mythology, especially the idea of selling your soul to the devil. And it ties music to temptation and freedom and danger. It brings people together, but it also invites chaos. And this juke joint represents community and expression, and then of course the juke joint gets threatened, so. And the movie also does raise a lot of questions about religion, who gets to define what is moral, and of course one of the main themes is race and cultural expression, especially how Black music and Black spaces have been historically both celebrated and feared. I loved how this movie mixed all of those historical aspects with something supernatural. I love historical horror. It is one of my favorite genres. This is probably one of the best movies on this list. It is atmospheric, so if I would recommend it, I would say 100%, and it has a beautiful score. I put on the playlist and now I'm listening to it. Yes, so if you want a good soundtrack to listen to, that one. Okay, so the next movie I watched in March was Project Hail Mary. Did I watch this on release day? Hold on. Okay, yeah, I watched this on release day, which is not common for me, but I had to. This is based on one of my favorite books of all time, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And if you don't know what Project Hail Mary is, gosh, that hurts me, but I'll tell you. It follows Ryland Grace, and Ryland Grace is a scientist who wakes up on a spaceship with no idea of how he got there. And as his memories slowly return, he realizes that he was put on that spaceship for a critical mission for, some reason I don't want to spoil. And this was just such a great and faithful adaptation. I felt like the directors really did it justice. And one thing I like about this movie, and about the book too, of course, is it's very sci-fi heavy, but it never feels like it is. It never feels like it's hard to follow. And even though throughout the story we're mostly following one character, it doesn't feel boring. It is very much a character-driven sci-fi story as opposed to an action-based one. And of course the whole situation with Ryan Gosling's glasses is hilarious. I don't even know how he did that. How did he? I don't think it's working. Wait, did I do it? probably looked so stupid doing that. And would I recommend it? Absolutely. Next up, I watched Bugonia, and this is another movie that I really wanted to see in theaters, but I just never got the chance to. And this movie follows two conspiracy-obsessed men, and their names are Danny and Teddy. And basically, there is this businesswoman, and her name is Michelle, and they think that she is an alien. And they believe that her mission is to destroy the Earth. And so what do? They kidnap her and interrogate her, as one does. And this director is known for... Oh, hello. I know. And this director is known for Poor Things, The Favorite, The Lobster, in that vein. And I haven't seen any of those movies, but from what I've heard, this movie is very similar to his other movies, deadpan and awkward and a little unsettling. Also, what I did not know until, again, I watched a video essay, this is based off of a South Korean film, which if you watch South Korean films, then you know you're probably in for a wild ride. And of course it has Emma Stone, but it also has Jesse Plemons, which I love Jesse Plemons. I loved him in I'm Thinking of Ending Things and especially Breaking Bad. He's just such a good actor. He was also apparently in an episode of Black Mirror, which I've not seen that episode. Basically, with a movie with an absurd premise like this, you would be shocked how surprisingly straight it plays it. Like, it dedicates itself to that premise and it takes itself seriously. But then because of how seriously these guys are taking it, it makes it funny somehow. And this movie plays a lot with power and control because even when the guys think they are the ones in charge, it's never really that simple. And like I said, this is one of those movies where you might be laughing, but you're definitely gonna feel uncomfortable. There are some especially disturbing scenes in this one. And that ending, that's all I have to say. If you know, you know. I don't even... Would I recommend it? Yes. People might be 50-50 on the ending, but I think the experience and the acting is worth it. And kind of out of left field, the last movie I watched in March and in the last of this quarter was Zootopia 2, which this is the follow-up to Zootopia, and it continues the story of Judy Hopps and Nick Wilde, and this was just a movie that I watched with some friends. It still keeps that same humor and lightheartedness that's in the first movie. Same theme of understanding differences. And again, this movie just expands on the first one, so we're seeing areas of Zootopia that we didn't see in the first one. Also, the snake in this movie is voiced by Ki-hoi Kwan, and I love him. I loved him in Everything Everywhere All at Once, and if you've seen his Oscar speech, I got goosebumps watching it. He deserved that Oscar. Would I recommend it? Yes. It was fun. It was cute. And I like animated movies, so. And that was my Q1 wrap up for the movies I watched. Very mixed bag, like I said. If you guys have any video suggestions, let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching.